Welcome back to the Mac and Mike Show. I'm Mac, and you're going to be seeing Mike in a few moments. This video today is one that I'm going to kind of take credit for, kicking off the subject. A couple of weeks ago, I saw this Victor Davis Hanson video that talked about the nation of Israel, and the fact that it was our best and staunchest ally in the Middle East. And it talked about the power their and capabilities of their military, their air force, their ground forces, etc. Even compared it to a number of our allies in NATO, explaining that Israel was probably the most powerful air force, and perhaps as well the best ground force military that we had as far as our allies go, including all the NATO countries. At any rate, talking to my friends and relatives, I've come across what I think is a little bit of a disturbing trend, especially in younger people. I'm a baby boomer. I think Mike falls in that category as well. But I've noticed that there seems to be an anti-Semitic trend among younger people younger than my generation. And it seems to be getting larger, and not only just on the left, but on the right as well. When I say left and right, I'm talking about the political spectrum. Now, most recently this morning, I found a video from Charlie Kirk, and I don't have the date and timestamp for it, but a young woman was asking him about whether or not Christians had a duty to support or defend or to help Israel. And Charlie Kirk is a pretty clear definition using the Bible verses to talk about God's, covenant with the Jews, and then the new covenant with Jesus Christ. And then he calls out several Bible verses that seem to indicate that Christians do, in fact, have this obligation to support Israel, the nation of Israel, but not the government of Israel. He was very clear to draw a dividing line between the two. So I'm not going to dominate this conversation. I'm sure we want to get some give and take, and I want to give Mike a chance to talk. But Mike, I'm sure you'll go ahead and link those sources that I had in the description, in the narration that you always include with our videos. What do you think is the circumstances of the nation of Israel becoming more despised by younger people, or maybe it's just a not a generational thing, but rather a societal thing? Maybe our society has moved into more of a it's okay to not like Jews anymore. What do you think, Mike?
I think it is moving into the older generation as well. It has obviously been there in the younger generation for quite some time. We saw all the Free Palestine protests. Of course, that's an outcome of our education systems. However, you know our friend Joe, and
Yep.
I thought it almost would be a good idea to get him on one of these programs. He and I have been talking recently, and he says he is an anti-Zionist. Now, I looked that up because it can mean different things to different people.
Uh-huh.
And I pointed out to him that there's like 6 or 7 different forms of Zionism,
Yep.
when you get into the details. But then the reasons he of course goes against Netanyahu, and that's kind of like, some people like Trump, some people hate Trump. And the other thing is he criticized the Israeli army because I think Charlie Kirk even brought that up because it happened a while back. In Gaza, I think they blew up a church.
That's true. That happened.
And, you know, I said, well, look, this is the technique of terrorists. They hide in mosques, synagogues, churches, hospitals, schools, and maybe a mistake was made. I don't know. But I don't think some army tank commander was sitting there intentionally saying, I hate Christians and I'm going to blow their church up. It just doesn't happen that way. Uh, I see a lot of different talking heads. The Benny Show.
Yep.
He's one. He sent me a video where he is criticizing Netanyahu. And I noticed that they take words out of context an awful lot. But yeah, the point basically is what Charlie Kirk said. You have to support the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, but not necessarily the government. I mean, you support the United States, but not every one of our policies is good. You know, but Israel is God's chosen people, and there's just no two ways about it. I pointed out, look, Jesus was a Jew, and you can't turn all the early Christians were Jewish, right? It all happened in Jerusalem. So I also pointed out that we as Gentiles are not to boast against the tree because we are grafted in. And so we are part of one thing. As a matter of fact, in early Christianity, it was just considered a Jewish sect, you know? Um, and one of the other bad raps, and I don't want to go on too long either, but one of the bad raps the Jews get is about the money hungry thing. And I had
Yes.
to explain to Joe that when Jewish people moved into Europe, you know, through the Middle Ages, up until Hitler, they were not allowed to own property. So they had to own things that they could pick up and take with them: gold, jewels, the currency of the day. And that's how they got the reputation of being money hungry, because they were not allowed to buy property, which is another form of wealth. So it's just people just don't understand history.
The other part of that, Mike, is that because the Jews were not allowed to own property, and in addition to that, they were often ostracized in the local society. They People didn't want to do business with them, and so the Jews had to come together and agree. I will buy my services from your services from you, and you buy my services from me. And they created this kind of, if you're familiar with the Rotary Club, they kind of created a Rotary Club from just Jewish businessmen. And the precepts of the Rotary is that you go around in your circle of the club, and whatever service. If somebody's a stationery store, you buy your stationery from them. If somebody's a copier repairman, you buy your copy services from them. And it's just an American way of providing businesses between local businesses and keeping the money locally. And the Jews had to do that because they didn't have any other option. And then, of course, the third rail of that dislike of Jews is because they couldn't own property, they had to own wealth in other forms. Oftentimes, they became lenders. When a bad credit risk went to the local, lender of choice in that particular location and were refused, oftentimes they would go to the local Jewish lender and say, "Hey, I need to get some money," and oftentimes the Jewish lender, knowing that they came to them, that was the lender of last resort, they sometimes would use usury interest rates, because they could, because the person who wanted to borrow money couldn't get it any other place. So all of those things, I think, have some grain or kernel of truth, and but that doesn't explain the rise of anti-Semitism today, Mike. As you noted, college campuses, Jewish students have trouble getting to their classroom, and we have protests. Now, part of it I understand. It's like the Tucker Carlson criticism of the Israeli government. Why are they still killing people in Gaza? They would claim there's a genocide going on in Gaza. And what Tucker Carlson says is, I'm against killing people anywhere. I get that sentiment. I'm not disagreeing with that sentiment from Tucker Carlson, but I think he takes it a little bit too far, and it's almost over the top. And, I don't know if you're aware of this, but recently the federal government it was revealed that the federal government is doing an investigation on Tucker Carlson because they believe that he was acting as a representative of the Iranian government. Have you heard that story?
I heard the story. I can't recall if it's true. A lot of that stuff is not true, or there's nuance.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's true or not. I just think, and of course, Tucker Carlson denies that vociferously. I'm not trying to say he's guilty just because there was an investigation, but what happens is that you tie his recent rants against the nation of Israel, and I do believe that his difficulty, his qualm, his disregard, and his trouble with the nation of Israel is regarding the war effort and the what he calls genocide. I'm not willing to call it that, but what he calls genocide. And I understand them. We must be fair-minded people, and we must treat all. Look, you and I have seen war up close, Mike. We know that when it comes to war needs to be the final choice. And I'm not so certain that this war with Iran, as some Democrats would argue, is a war of choice. Now, I could defend the war, and we can do that if you want to go in that direction. But I think what bothers me, and I think what fuels some of this anti-Israel debate, this anti-Israel feelings, is there are people out there who claim that this Iran war is really Israel's war, and the United States of America is simply a useful idiot, a useful tool to do Israel's bidding. And most of that comes down to the claim that APAC, a very staunch, strong American lobby group, is lobbying our government, our Congress, in favor of Israel. Do you have anything to say about? I've touched on half a dozen different areas, Mike. Anything to add in those things that I've said?
Well, yeah, first I looked up while you were speaking the Tucker Carlson thing. And as of March of this year, there's no confirmation that the DOJ is looking into Tucker Carlson. So
Okay.
I mean, that's just where that stands now. Um, there's always lobbying, and people are going to take it out of context and exaggerate everything. It's one of the reasons I said I wanted to start trimming down my friends on Facebook because
Yeah.
people pass things that are not verified and or exaggerate. I don't care if you express an opinion. Everybody's entitled, but facts are facts.
Yes.
And that's where you and I always come to in our discussions. So there's the known and the unknown, and we can't just make things up. And I think people draw conclusions based on opinion rather than fact.
Yes.
And that's where this whole mess originates. So, you know, in a moment, I hope we discuss a little bit of the biblical background because I think that's sort of interesting. Uh,
Yeah. Let's. Yeah.
well, a long time ago, a preacher mentioned about in Revelation where it says all nations will come against Israel. And he pointed out that America didn't seem to be anywhere in the biblical prophecy. So he said one of two things. And this is back in the 90s. He said either America does not exist or America has become something different than it is today. Because obviously America would step in and protect Israel.
You would think.
Well, that was the assumption in the 1990s, and it was the early 90s. And I stopped first to clarify. All nations doesn't mean every nation, and this is proven other places in Scripture where it says all nations go after him, meaning Jesus. But obviously, all nations did. It meant
Africa. Yeah.
yeah,
Africa wasn't
well, it meant
involved. Russia. Yeah.
people from all nations,
Right.
all the various nations that were around, not
Hmm.
everybody.
Right.
So, there's a couple nuances there, but could it be that America will one day lean so hard into this, even if it's not anti Semitic, just not caring about them as deeply as we once did, allow this to transpire?
Yeah.
And when it comes to, all the people saying we shouldn't be involved in Iran, every president, you see the montages, maybe if you're on the computer enough or YouTube, every president since Reagan has said that we should basically do what Donald Trump did.
Yeah.
So for Tucker to say, or anybody to say, this is not our war, that we're somehow beholden to Israel, no, this has been an ongoing problem. And Trump probably views it like they're the last thing standing in the way of the David Accords, bringing all the nations like Saudi
That's
Arabia.
another issue. That's another issue. Absolutely. I wasn't thinking about that, but the important part of this entire equation, sure.
Well, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, the Abraham Accords are very important to long-term peace in the Middle East, and Iran, obviously, because they were threatening and saber-rattling against all of their neighbors. And you see, when the Iran war started, they immediately shot missiles and weapons and drones at their surrounding nations, UAE and Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and et cetera, Egypt. So, Iran. They're not really Muslim in the sense that they are the desert. I mean, Iranians are really Persians, which is a nuance different than most of the other members of the Middle East. But you hit on a subject about the war in Iran or Iran. Mike, I'm one of those people that believes, and I believe it because they said it many, many times. Iran, the government of Iran, not the people of Iran, but the government of Iran said that the Satan, that is Israel, and the great Satan, that is the United States, must be eradicated, must be eliminated. That was their, like our Constitution says, all men are created equal is the preamble or the Declaration. But you know, their Constitution basically says Israel and the United States must be killed. They must be dead. We have to take them off the face of the earth. And if they get a nuclear weapon, people say, well, they don't have missiles that can reach us. Well, we saw from the war that missiles can reach farther than they thought. But here's the thing. I'm not worried about a missile coming at us because we can defend a missile coming at us. What I'm worried about is somebody putting in an atomic weapon, a nuclear weapon, in a suitcase-sized box and carrying it across the border and putting it in the trunk of a car and parking that car outside the White House or outside Congress or outside Wall Street or fill in the blank for the target that they might want to hurt us the worst, and then remotely destroying, remotely detonating that atomic weapon. Half life and how long that geographic area would be unfit for human beings. That's my concern. And if they said over and over and over again they're going to do it, and we see how they operate with predominantly with their terrorist allies, their subordinate units, the Houthis and the Hamas and the Hezbollah. You see their terrorist surrogates are attacking multiple nations on multiple fronts, and why would we expect any less from Iran? So, I understand with where Donald Trump's coming from. Do we have to wait for them to explode a nuclear weapon in the United States of America before we take them out and take out their ability to create nuclear weapons? And my answer to that should be no. If we fully, truthfully, honestly believe that they're coming to nuclear weapons so they can harm us or harm our allies, then I think we need to stop them. I don't want to hear all of this. Oh, it's a myth. The weapons of mass destruction. That's bullshit. We know that they're enriching uranium. We in the talks, in the treaty talks, we said, look, we will give you enriched uranium rods for nuclear reactors for free for all of eternity, and they turned that down. So there's no reason for them to turn that down if they're truly only interested in nuclear power. They want nuclear fissionable material so that it can harm us, and I think it's prudent on our part to make sure that they don't have the ability to do that, either us or Israel. Because to be honest with you, we're a far distance away, and even if they manage to smuggle a small, dirty nuclear weapon into our country, it's going to affect a small part of our geography. Israel could be a complete sheet of glass. That's a joke, of course. I mean, Israel could be what their entire country is not very big. Iran, the nation of Iran is what, twice the size of Texas, something like that. I mean,
Yes.
it's It's huge, and people have no concept of what's going on. They see something on MSNBC or they hear something on CNN, and they believe it. Sadly, people need to think for themselves. And Iran is a danger to the United States of America. However you cut it, however you slice it, however far in the future you might project it, and we are righteous in defending and protecting ourselves in that war. I'm sorry I got off the track. We really wanted to talk about whether or not Israel prejudice is rising and why, especially in the United States, especially with younger Americans.
Well, I don't think it's wrong to go into the war in general. Um, I think that's a good track. I don't like to talk about what's in the news, except something like this is ongoing. So it's
Hmm.
always something new. It's not really off topic. But someone recently, and now remember, I was doing a website for Banaf Sheh Zand, who her father was an Iranian general of some sort way back in the day when they were, under the Shah, and
Hmm.
he was murdered. And she explained to me that the situation in Iran is the mullahs in charge are actually more like the mafia. They use their version of the Islamic religion to keep control of the people. And here, the problem that we're facing is 20% of the country is probably aligned with the IRGC and the government.
Yes.
50% of the people want to return to a state of freedom. Like if you ever looked at videos from Iran back in the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s, I showed it to my daughter the other day, and she said they look just like Americans. They're
Yep.
dancing, they're nightclubs,
Yep.
they're going out to dinner, sitting by cafes.
Yep.
Their women are in bikinis on the beaches.
Yep. Very
Uh,
westernized.
so that's the 50% there. Then there's probably the remainder, which now we've accounted for 70%. 30% of the population is probably very much like America in that it just doesn't pay attention to, it doesn't seem to affect them deeply. So they're not taking it personally. They're not really picking a side. But in order for this to succeed, and I'm thinking as a special operator, the people of Iran are not armed. And I
Right.
mean, we are very good at arming people covertly,
Yep.
but
Hmm.
that takes time. And you
Yes.
need to vet the people that you're giving the arms to. You can't just willy nilly, walk in and start handing weapons to everybody. So that's the big problem. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know, Mac, how we're going to protect that. And I know we're getting way off subject when I talk about that. But if they can fire missiles from 4,000 kilometers away, there's no, depending on where those missiles are, we'd have to hit every single missile launcher and missile in their country. So I don't know
You
where it's
know,
going to end.
Mike, when I was sent to Grenada, um, the Caribbean had um, their own military and organization of those organization of Caribbean states, maybe it was
Yeah,
something like that. They had their own military, and the point I get to was saying that is the Americans kicked the Cubans off the island of Grenada, and then we kind of turned things over to local officials. And I don't want to see one American boot on the ground in Iran. I don't want to see dead Americans fighting a war in the Middle East. I don't want to see that. Not ever. Even if it's Israel's that's at stake. America should keep. I'm not an isolationist, but I do think we should protect our interests. But I don't want to see boots on Carg Island. I don't want to see boots protecting the Straits of Hormuz. Now I know that we've activated the 82nd Airborne. We also have the
get closer again, Mac.
I know also that that they're doing something with the second um, Marine Expeditionary Force. And if those things are going on, that if they're moving those kinds of assets to the Middle East, there could be boots on the ground. And the way I look at it is what the Middle East needs to do is create this military force of those multiple uh, Middle Eastern states that have interest there. Egypt has a great military. We've trained a lot of their leaders. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a military, but like we do, but they pay people to protect them. There are other states that have military capabilities. If there's any boots on Park Island that aren't Iranian, they should be Middle Eastern states. I believe that shouldn't be us. And we can be close enough with their support and other support, and if need be, we can go help them out. But and look, what is it? 20% of the world's oil, or is it as high as 40% of the world's oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz? It's a big number.
Yeah, your audio is going out again, and
Okay.
and that just
Well,
came back in now. I don't know what's happening.
well, let's wrap this thing up, Mike. We don't want to have a bad quality video. We made a great stab at it, but here's the thing: I think we need to leave our folks with. There's an uptick, an uprise in Israeli or Jewish hatred and discrimination. And I worry that could be a problem. My general sense is, Mike, I don't hate anybody because of the religion they hold, the color of their skin, their attitude. I hate individuals who mean to do me harm. I don't want to be harmed. And if those people want to do me harm, then I want to harm them back. As the old Andy Cap comic strip said, I thought he was going to hit me in the nose, so I hit him back first. I believe in that kind of stuff. You don't wait to be injured until you fight back. I think that you have a responsibility, and our government has a responsibility to protect and defend us. But I don't understand this rise in anti-Semitism. I just don't understand it. I get how people are upset about the killing in Gaza. I understand how about the bombing that's going on in Iran that oftentimes hits collateral damage civilian targets, and I hate all of that. But I think there are times when, just like when the United States bombed Dresden in World War II, there was a lot of collateral damage, but we won, and we had to win. And I think the Iranian threat has to be put down. And I don't know what contributes to the rise of anti Semitism in the United States and elsewhere, but it should stop. As a matter of fact, I'll go another step further, Mike. It must stop. And I hope that you'll include that Charlie Kirk video and some references to some of the Bible verses that I know you have that explain why Christians don't have to defend the government of Israel, but do need to defend the nation of Israel. You got anything to add, Mike?
Nope, agreed.
All right. Well, I guess it's time for Mac and Mike
Out.
out.